Okay. We'll start here on Daf Hey. The Gemara tries to derive Esei Dochalosase from the case of Tiglachas Mitzora. The Mitzora is obligated to shave off his head, and in so doing, the Gemara says he violates a lav, and that lav is Lo Sakifu Pa'as Roshechem. And yet, the Torah says that he is obligated in Tiglachas, in the overriding of the lav of Lo Sakifu. So by definition, this means that an essay trumps a Lotzas. And this, according to the Gemara, should be a source for universally, in all cases, essay dochalos. So the Gemara later on rejects it because, as we'll see, the lav of hakaf is what's called a lav she'eno shava bakol. We'll try to see why. Now, the issue that we have today, and we touched on it in the past, is a sugya in Masechet Yevamot, on Daf Mem Zayin. The Gemara there records machlokes about a case of lo sakifu piasra sheichem, in which a gadol is being makif a katan. The issue is there are two parts or two participants in the lav of hakafa. There's the makif who's doing the action, and the nikaf to whom upon whose body, whose head the action is being done. And according to Rav Adavar Ava, in the Sugya Nazir, there's a hekesh between makif and nikaf. And if there's no chiyuv on the nikaf, then there's no chiyuv on the makif. It's almost as if the makif is participating in a violation of the lav of the nikaf. So that if the nikaf is a katan and doesn't violate the lav, then the makif is also exonerated from the violation of the lav. That's the shita of Rav Adavar Ava. Rav Huna, on the other hand, says that even if someone is makif a katan, you're chayav. In other words, Rav Huna never had this hekesh between makif and nikaf, and therefore, from his perspective, you can separate between the two. The nikaf might be pot because he's a katan in this case. The makif is still chayav. And now we have a kasha of Tosfos there in Nazir based on our Gemara. The Gemara assumes that we can derive Esei Docha Lotzas from the case of Tiglachas Mitzora. And Tosfos says, wait a second. We have a principle called Efshal L'Kayim Shneim, which means that we restrict the application of Esei Dochalos to situations in which we have a no-win situation. There's an absolute collision between the Esei and the Los Nase. But here, according to Rav Adavar Ava, we have a possibility of, shall we say, having our cake and eat it too, meaning we could avoid the violation of the law. How does Tosfos structure that? He says that, let's say the makif, in this case, this is the flip side of Rav Adavar Ava, would be a lav bar chiyuv. For example, we could ask the makif to be a woman, a katan, a guy, any of the above, and now he's going to do the hakafa of the head of the mitzorah. The mitzorah will fulfill his essay because he's the nikaf. He doesn't have to be the makif and the nikaf. On the other hand, he would not violate the lav hakafa because, or in the light of this hekesh of Rav Adavar Ava, meaning since the makif is not included in the lav, he's a lav bar chiyuva. Therefore, the nikaf, in this case, the mitzorah is not included in the lav. Why then do we have the right to jump to conclusions about Esei Dochalos Aseh? And in order to answer this question, Tosfos has to come up with a what I call, instead of a two-way street, a one-way street. And the Hekesh of Rav Adabar Ava between Makiv and Nikaf worked in one direction. We'll call it from B to A, but not from A to B. And basically what Tosfos says is the following, that the thrust of the Isur Baltakif is on the Nikaf. And from the Nikaf, we jump over to the Makif. It says Rav Adabar Ava, if the Nikaf is outside of the Geder of the Isur, like for example, the case of Katan, then the Makif therefore is now exonerated. He's not liable. But in the opposite direction, that we don't have it included in the Sekesh. To say that since the Makif is not included in the Lav, therefore the Nikaf is exonerated, we can exonerate the Makif, but not the Nikaf. The thrust and the main primary, shall we say, persona in this Lav, who is the Torah addressing? The Torah is addressing the Nikaf. Again, that's not the simple shot in the Pasuk. The Pasuk says lo takifu. But lo takifu means that you shouldn't set it up in a way that your hair will be cut, that you'll have a baldy, shape your hair. And that's the Yisur on the Nikaf. So Rav Adabar Ava was saying that in a scenario where the Nikaf is exonerated, then the Makif is out, is potter. But the other way around, to say that just because the Makif is potter, therefore the Nikaf is going to be potter. What does that mean? That every Nikaf could just set up a akafa by appointing a guy or an isha or a cotton to cut his hair? That's not so. So that is a summary of Tosfos in Masechet Nazir as it applies to our sunnah. Now, what I'd like to do now is analyze a machlokus about how to understand this between the Beis HaLevi and the Imrei Moshe. And this you'll find on page Lamed Gimel. So you're on the right column, and the second paragraph starts with the Hiksha Beis HaLevi. He says the following. What I don't understand, asks the Beis HaLevi, is when we apply the principle of Esei Docha Losas, even in a situation where it's EF Sholakayim Shneim vis-a-vis one participant, but if it's a partnership and both partners are violating the law, then the principle of Esei Docha Losas has to apply for both participants in the Averis Halah. And therefore, why would a gadol have the right to be makif the mitzorah, granted that the mitzorah is obligated in the mitzvah saseh of taras ha-mitzorah of tiglachas, the makif doesn't have that mitzvah, then Tosfos's kash is still difficult even after their answer. Yeah, it's true. We concede that Tosfos's breakthrough, Tosfos's point is correct. The nikaf will violate the law even if the makif is the makif is a katan. But nevertheless, what about the makif? Why are you allowing a makif who's a gadol? You should have to require that the makif be a lav bar chiyuva to eliminate the lav of hakafa vis-a-vis the makif, and that we don't find. We don't find any, limitation clauses in the contract that says, well, we must have a makif who's a lav bar chiyuva. Now, the Beis HaLevi tries to answer this question, and he rejects his answer. He says maybe the answer to this question would be that once we have Esei Dochalosa vis-a-vis the Nikach, the Mitzorah, then we can apply Esei Dochalosa vis-a-vis the Makiv, even though the Makiv has no Esei. I call it the principle of Kol Yisrael Arev themselves. I'm just using that with Sameir Tosin as a memory device. What I mean to say is that the Makiv participates vicariously in the fulfillment of the essay of the Nikah. The Nikah is a mitzvah, he has the mitzvah, and for the sake of the Nikah's mitzvah, the Makiv is considered as if he's higher than the essay. His participation in this essay overrides the lotus, and he rejects this. Now, why does the Beis Halevi reject this? If you take a look at the end of the paragraph that we focused on, he says, "Lo poter Rav Ada," meaning Rav Ada bar Rava, "el b'makif es hakoton she'eno bar chiyuv kol ika. Ma she'en kein b'mitzora shu bar chiyuv v'lo hutar el b'makofa zu." The afzulo huchalo mamish el dechuyev b'nei ha'esei l'shitas Rav Huna hamachayev af b'makif es hakoton v'adi tikshe kushana. The Beis Halevi differentiates between the case of the Mitzorah and the case of Rav Ada bar Rava. Rav Ada bar Rava, in the context of his Hekej, he's talking about a case of a Makiv HaKatan. In a case of a Makiv HaKatan, then the Nikaf, meaning the Katan, is not included in this Avera, just like he's not included in any Avera. Or in the language of the Beis Halevi, Eino bar chiyuva kol ikar, if you want to underline those words. But in the case of the Tzorah, he's a bar chiyuv in the lav of HaKofa. We're going to allow him, for the sake of the essay, to be doche the lav. That's fine. But does that exonerate the Makiv? Why should we pater up the Makiv? We could pater up the Makiv in the case of the Nikaf, it's a lav bar chiyuva klal. He's out of the parsha. His hakof is not considered hakof. But in the case of the Mitzorah, he certainly has hakof, so why should we pater up the Makiv, according to Rav Ada bar Rava? And Tos insists that the thrust of this Avera is the Nikaf, but certainly the Makiv is not within the parsha of Esek Dochalosas. And Beis Halevi writes, without any further proofs, but just simply as a mathematical result of the kasha, he has no choice but to propose a breakthrough that the Makif also fulfills the mitzvah of Tiglach Hasam Mitzorah. It's very strange, but that's his conclusion. And now we get to the Imrei Moshe. The Imrei Moshe says that Tosfos never entertained the possibility that the Makiv is fulfilling the mitzvah. In fact, Tosfos' shita is that Tiglachas Mitzorah has to be implemented by a Kohen, none other than a Kohen. And that you'll find explicitly in the Rambam, in the 11th chapter of Hilchos Tumas Saras. And it's based on a Torah's Kohen. Now, if you need a Kohen, what was Tosfos asking that according to Rav Ada bar Rava, a Katan or an Isha or Nachri should be appointed to do the Tiglachas of the Mitzorah, and therefore it's Efshel Kaim Shneim? That's not a Kiyum mitzvah. Efshel Kaim Shneim means I can have my cake and eat it, I can fulfill the mitzvah without violating the law. But here in this case, I will not fulfill the mitzvah. Shehuk shalem shigaleach hakoden es hapeos v'achach yikayim hakohen es hamitzvah kishar b'shar saras harosh. That most of the tiglachas will be done by the koton, and the kohen will finish the job. Whatever hairs are on his head are left, that's what he's going to cut off. And that's how the mitzvah of tiglachas on the part of the mitzorah will be fulfilled, because the kohen will cut off the last few hairs. And now Tosfos asks the kasha. In this case, there will be no averis halah, because the main haircut was implemented by Allah bar chiyuva, and in the context of the hekesh of Arad bar Ava, if there's no aver on the part of the makif, then there should be no aver upon the nikah. That was Tosfos' kasha. And came shuv hadra kutzla duchta mahu ilu b'teirutza. But now we have to understand, how does Tosfos answer this kasha? Shrei af l'maskonis divreim shanikaf over af kitchekoton v'galfon mikol makom yakifenu hakoton kidei limona mi'isar makif. This kind of mitzvah yidei kohen b'shar harosh or b'seir harosh. So what was Tosfos' answer? That the nikaf violates the lav, even though the makif is a koton. Well, what does that mean? We still should advocate and insist that it be a koton who does the hakafa, because then there's no isur on the makif, which was the Beis Halevi's kasha. We don't really have an answer to that question. Guarantee us that the makif will not violate the lav by appointing a koton to do the hakafa. The mitzvah will be fulfilled by the kohen who does the finale. Therefore, the answer of the Beis Halevi that the makif is part of the mitzvah, that doesn't make any bit of sense, because we need a kohen to do the hakafa. Imrei Mochanat gives his own alternative answer. Lefia emes shanikaf over gam shamakif eno bar chiyuva tzorch sheyakifenu dafka kohen kidei shtiskayim mitzvahs tiglachas gam b'peah shoyim yakifenu katan lo tiskayim mitzvah b'kofa zu v'lo ye'ema sheyidches ha'isur nikaf. The Imrei Moshe says that in the context of the mitzvah of tiglachas mitzorah, which requires a kohen, kishanikaf over gam kshamakif edu bar chiyuva. Let's say, for example, we appointed a kohen to do the hakafa. Nevertheless, we need a kohen to do the hakafa. What does that mean? It's not enough for the kohen to cut a few hairs off the head of the nazir, but rather he needs to cut the hair, not the last two hairs, but the hair. That's called peas roshan. So the mitzvah is peas roshan, and that cannot be made fulfilled unless you introduce a kohen. So therefore, in order for the nikaf to fulfill his mitzvah and apply esed of velosis, we need that the makif be a kohen. Okay, so now let's think about this. The makif is a kohen, correct? So what is the Imrei Moshe's final answer to this question? Let me just give it a minute here to sink in. In Tosus it. Kasha, let's see if we get the cheshbon. I had it, but now I just have to review it and calculate again. Tosus asks, why not set up a situation with Makif is a lav bar chiyuva? Therefore, the nikaf would not be violating the lav. It's actually kind of staying. So Sid says, no, the nikaf will still be violating the lav, even if the makif is a lav bar chiyuv. So now, the Beis Halevi asks, well, if that be the case, why don't we appoint a lav bar chiyuv to do the hakafa? And the Moshe is saying, then in such a case, the nikaf would not fulfill his mitzvah. We could not apply the principle of esei b'vlas. Therefore, we must assume that the makif is a bar chiyuv. Now, does that mean that for the sake of the essay of the nikaf, we could override the lav of hakafa, which is incumbent upon the makif, which was as far that the Beis Halevi rejected? Because since it's only dechia, it's not hutra, dechia is for the essay. And that forced the Beis Halevi to answer that there's an essay incumbent even upon the makif. So again, where is the machlokas here between Moshe and the Beis Halevi? That's what I want to clarify. We're assuming that Tosfos holds that the Katan, if he does the Giluach, that would not be a fulfillment of the mitzvah, according to the Rebbe Moshe, not like the Beis Halevi. It's going to be a partnership here between the Labar Chiyuva and the Kohen. And what was Tosfos' answer? No, that even if Labar Chiyuva does some part of the haircut, that's enough for the mitzvah to be fulfilled. We're going to require that the Kohen do the major part of it. And therefore, we're going to apply the principle of Esei Dochalosa. But how do we apply the Esei Dochalosas to the makif? What permits the makif, in this case the Kohen, to violate the lav of hakafa for the sake of the nikah? I think the answer is hutra. He's going to have to say that what? Since the Torah commanded the Kohen to be makif the Mitzorah, even though it entails violation of the law, because the Kohen is required to be makif the payos. That's called hutra. As far as the nikaf is concerned, the Mitzorah, we certainly have esei dochalosas. It's not efshel kam shneim, because he couldn't have a lav bar chiyuv. See, we said that he couldn't do it with a lav bar chiyuv because in any event, the nikaf would be violating the lav. Oh, that's true. That's undeniable. That even if a lav bar chiyuv was doing the hekef, he was the makiv, nevertheless, the nikaf would still be violating the lav. But now we have another question, and that's the Beis Halevi question. Why not have someone else do that? The Labar Chiyuv do the hakafa. So the Rebbe Moshe is saying, no, that's impossible because the Torah commanded the Kohen. Yeah, but if that be the case, what was Tosfos' kasha? Tosfos' kasha was, why not set up the makif as a lav bar chiyuv? But the Moshe is saying that that's impossible. Maybe he's saying that in the answer to Tosfos. Although, I don't know, that's a bit of a stretch. But the final answer is that there ain't no such thing as a lav bar chiyuva to do the hakafa on behalf of the nikah, because then you'd forfeit the essay, and then you're left with the losa set without an essay. And in order to achieve the essay, you need that a bar chiyuva, not only a bar chiyuva, but a kohen specifically, implement the glach. And therefore, we're going to have to apply the principle of essay dochel losa. The only point that I want to make here is, which I think is still, in my mind, at least a weak link here, is now we need to apply essay dochalosa for the makif, the Kohen, because he's fulfilling the essay of Tiglachas. But then the Imrei Moshe would have to accept the position of the Beis HaLevi. Now, the Beis HaLevi rejected the possibility that the makif could have an essay dochalosa situation based on the nikah. You can't do the transmutation. Therefore, the essay dochalosa would have to be the essay of the makif. The Merosh is pointing out that we need a Kohen to do the hakafa. It doesn't seem to say explicitly that the Kohen is being the kind of mitzvah hakafa. So that's what's unclear. I don't know right now if the Merosh is saying that the essay of the nikaf, meaning the mitzvah, could now supply an essay dochalosa for the makif, even though the makif is not fulfilling the mitzvah. Or alternatively, maybe the Imrei Moshe holds that the makif, like the Beis HaLevi, is fulfilling the mitzvah, but it's not a makif bi'alma. You can't just find a makif out there. You need to find a code. That's possible. I was going to ask Rabbi Kapustin if he remembers. Oh, Rabbi Kapustin, I don't see you. Did we give an explanation for this Imrei Moshe? Do you happen to remember? I think we missed this point last time.
I don't think so.
Yeah, I think we missed this point. I'm going to read it one more time because I think there's something missing here. He says, "Al ken yesh l'taresh via emes shanikaf over gam kshamakif eno bar chiyuva tzarich sheyakifenu dafka kohen kedei shetizkayim mitzvos tiglachas gam v'peah." Sharei im yakifenu katan lo tizkayim mitzvahs hakafa zu v'lo yeh mashi yitches ha'isur nikah. Oh, good. So now we're saying that the makif will violate the Isur lav, and we don't know what allows him to do so. But it's definitely going to be a makif who's a bar chiyuv because we need a kohen, and therefore the Imrei Moshe pulls the rug, so to speak, proverbially, from underneath the feet of the Beis HaLevi. The Beis HaLevi is saying, well, why don't we just get a la bar chiyuv, a cotton, to do the hakaf? That the Imrei Moshe rejects outright. We need a kohen, so we need a bar chiyuv, but we're still left with the problem, which the Imrei Moshe now has to address in the next paragraph. What is going to allow the Kohen, the Makiv, to violate the law of Hakafa, given the fact that he doesn't have an essay? Hiksha Imrei Moshe, although Af HaMakiv over belav zeh v'im kain eich hutar iser hakaf lemakif. Oh, okay, Baruch Hashem. I was beginning to doubt myself, but I see that we're on the mark. I mean, we're just following this logically, and this is the next problem that we have to raise. What will allow it an application of essay dochalosa for the Kohen Amakiv when he is not fulfilling the essay? It's only the Nikaf, the Mitzorah is fulfilling the essay. Hello, ein ha-essay ella b'mitzorah ha-Nikaf. Ve'ech nidcha Isra Amakiv mishum essay shel ha-Nikaf. Oh, very excited. Even if I won't know his answer, at least I'm happy that he's asking the question. So I'm going to skip now to the second line on the left column. The Tirates, Shebemakom Shehutar Isra Nikaf, Af HaMakif Eino Over Olam. Okay, now this has to be understood because Tosfos says that the main thrust of the lav of Hakofa is on the Nikaf, and even Rav Ada bar Rav agrees that even if you would exonerate the Makiv, the Nikaf would still be in violation. And the Hekesh only goes in one direction, not in two directions. Maybe, I'm just guessing now, maybe what the Imrei Moshe is going to argue is that since the Torah imposed on the Nikaf, the Mitzorah, a mitzvah of Hakafa, therefore, Rav Ada bar Ava is going to apply his principle that Hamakif is Hakon Potter. Oh, I got it. This has to be what he's going to say. I haven't looked at it, but it's got to be. Because what was Rav Ada bar Ava? He was saying that a gadol is makif a katan does not violate the Isa because of the hekesh between nikaf and makif. That's exactly what's going to apply here. The Kohen on makif is not going to violate. He's like being makif a katan. Why? Because since the nikaf is a mitzorah and he's obligated the mitzvah of tiglachas, he becomes like a katan. He's not a bar chiyuva in the Isser of Hakaf. It's not really true because if you're going to say that, then how do you derive the principle of Masechet Yevamot? All right, I got excited because I thought I had the answer. He says, "Lo mi boy l'shitas Rav Huna sovesham makim sekod potur el afler of adavar av oser lahakif poton." Oh, I messed up a little bit on the shitas here. Rav Ada bar Ava is the one who says that you're not allowed to be makif a katan, right? Just a second. Wait a minute, I'm getting confused here. Rav Ada bar Ava was the one who said that if the nikaf is not a bar chiyuv, then the makif is potter. So what is he saying here? El afler of Ada bar Ava ha oser. What does this mean? Ha oser lahakif katan. Okay, now I'm really confused. Ha oser lahakif katan. We said we're going to Ada bar Ava. There's a hekesh between the makif and the nikaf, and if the nikaf is not a bar chiyuv, then the makif is potter. What does he mean here when he says al afler of Ada bar Ava ha oser lahakif katan? Honestly, I think there's a mistake here in the print. He switched the shitas here just to confuse us. The first shita, which he attributes to Rav Huna, that's really Rav Ada bar Ava. Shamakif zakot potter. El afler Rav Huna haoser lahakif katan ein ze el mishum sha'af she'eno bar chiyuva Mikol gam etzlo nechshav hadavar l'maisa isa sharei also achilo davar also. Okay, fine. So that's going to be the shita of Rav Huna. The shita achas, it's already a sugya in Yevamot, is based on the mitzvah lafisha beisa. Right, that's interesting to set up an isa doraisa on that basis. But in any event, aval heichan shenivcher ha'isa eitzai nikaf. Oh, we should essay dochalos. Eino nechshav etzel l'maisa ver klal l'divrei hakol ein l'chayev olav amakif. Interesting. He is pushing the following agenda. The Imrei Moshe. He's saying that if I compare the katan hanikaf to the mitzora hanikaf, then on the contrary, in the case of the katan hanikaf, there's more of an avera than in the case of the mitzora. Why? Because bez the mitzvah lafrisho and also lachilo davar isur. So when you set up this baldy haircut for the katan, then you're really incriminating the katan, so to speak, which we're not allowed to do. Even though again the katan is part of an mitzvahs, but that's not relevant. But in the case of the mitzora, there we're going to say that there's no avera at all. But again, how do you derive from that essay dochalosis? That's why they don't chap. See, let's get this straight. The Beis Halevi said that in the case of a katan, he's a la bar chiyuva kol ikar. In the mitzora, he's a bar chiyuva, but we only have a din of dechiyah for the sake of the essence. And that din of dechiyah is not going to help us with the makif. Therefore, the Beis Halevi comes to the conclusion that if the makif is not considered a bar chiyuva, there's no way we can apply essay dochalosas. And the entire logic of the Beis Halevi is predicated on one single premise, and that is that as far as the nikaf is concerned, there's really no heter other than essay dochalosas. And that's not going to help the makif. And that forces the hand of the Beis Halevi to come to the conclusion that even the makif is chayiv in this mitzvah. But the Imrei Moshe is saying just the reverse. He's saying that even according to Rav Huna, who would say that a makif sakotin is chayiv, he would agree that a makif es hamitzora is patur, not because of esei dochalosase, but because it's not a ma'aser avera of hakafa, because since the nikaf is completely excluded from this avera, and that is as a result of the fact that essay dochalosase, therefore the makif has to be excluded from the avera. You can't say the makif is causing the nikaf a violation of the isa if the nikaf is not included in the isa. In the case of cotton, we have halacha that we're not allowed to be machil davrasa the cotton. Right? You can't give non-kosher ice cream to a cotton. So that the avera of a cotton is considered an avera. I think Reb Chaim, who was the Imrei Moshe's Rebbe, also is of the opinion that a ma'aser avera of a cotton is considered a ma'aser avera. But in the case of Esei Dochalosase, this is not called a ma'aser avera. It's the exact opposite of the Beis Halevi, because the Beis Halevi was assuming that in the case of a katan, makif a katan, that's an eino bar chiyuv, kol ikar. But in the case of the Mitzvah, he's really about Chiyuva, and we need the essay to override the Lassus, and that forces the Beis Halevi to the position that the Makif is also the kind of an essay. So let's just summarize. Why is the Makif allowed to be Makif the Nikah? According to Beis Halevi, it's because of essay dochalosas, which means that the Makif is chayav in the essay. According to the Imrei Moshe, it has nothing to do with essay dochalosas. It has to do with the fact that the Makif is not doing anything wrong. And that is because there's no Maisa Vera of Tiglachas, because the Mitzorah is fulfilling his essay. Now, what I'd like to know is, does that have any impact on the original discussion that we had? Do you remember by chance what the case was? Maybe it was the case of Yibum. Right? In the case of Yibum, if we assume that the mitzvah is on the Yavam and not on the Yavama, then how can we apply Esei Dochalosas at the Yibum if she doesn't have the Esei? And that forced the Tosus Yom Kippurim, which is back on the page Yud Ches, which you might have in your archives, anyway, to the position that what I call transmutation, that if someone else, so let's just think, if there's Esei Dochalosas, as far as the Yavam is concerned, because he's Mitzuva in the essay, then the Yavama herself could also be included in essay Dochalosas. That was the Tosus Yom Kippur. If Kiveger assumes, no, she can't violate a law because of his essay. We're going to have to assume that even the Yavama has a mitzvah saseh. Let's just see if we apply the logic here. No Maisa Vera. Yeah, I would say the following. Tell me if you agree with this logic. There's no connection between Yibum and the Imrei Moshe in the case of Hakofas Ha'as Nazir. Because in Hakofas Peah, the Isser is that you are setting up a Hakafa for the Nikah. That's not the case in Yibum. In Yibum, he has an Avera of Erva and she has an Avera of Erva. Each one is involved independently. I mean, obviously in a partnership, but in the Avera per se. It's not that she is setting up his Maisa, and that's why it's awesome. It's awesome. I wonder if anybody would say such a thing, that the reason why she's included in the Isser Erva is because she's setting up his Maisa Erva. Could that possibly be the case? I mean, it sounds like crazy far, but I'm just thinking out loud. Let's say, for example, if he might be interesting in the case of Kahuna. Let's say, for example, she's a Zona Chalola or a Grusha, and she has a relationship with a Kohen. So it could be that she is now setting up his Chilul Kedushas Kahuna. Now, if, let's say, he had a mitzvah essay, which would be Docha Los Aseh, we came up with such a scenario, then it could be that she would not be in violation of the law. Because according to the Imrei Moshe, once he has Esei Dochalosah, he doesn't have a violation of an Avera, Maisa Avera. Then she's not setting up his Maisa Avera, meaning she's not setting up his Chilul Kedushas Kahuna, and therefore maybe she would be exempt from the Losas as well, even if she doesn't have the Esei. Fascinating. Okay. Now, the Gemara rejects, if you recall, hakofas ha-mitzora as the source for Esek Dokolosa because it's a lav shein shavu bakol. And Rashi says, why is it a lav shein shavu bakol? Shekein noshim eno musharos belav da'akof. So the Kovetz HaOros of Rabbi Chanan asked the following question: according to Rav Barav, who holds that noshim musharos shelo lahakif an noshim. Where is this? Okay, also the sugya of Nazir. So this is Rav Ada bar Ava's shita that a woman is not allowed to cut the hair of a man. If that be the case, then the Isar Makiv is an Isar Shavu Bakol. Women are included in the Isar. Shuv yesh lomod esei docholosa sashav bakol meisar makiv shenitchem nei esei shel piglachas mitzora. Pasuk Yashiv shav adabar aval l'shitasa asover she'eni salam makiv el b'mokom shanikaf bar chiyuva osi shapish kemiacher she'isar nikaf eno shav b'chol bidche Shuv ein klal isur lamakiv the ein sarpol din dechir. Let's just figure this out. Again, Rabbi Chanan is saying that we have a problem according to Rav Barav, who holds that noshim are included in the lav of hekif if they're makif in each. That makes it into a lav of shav b'kol. So he answers that Rav Ada bar Rava holds that in order for the makif to be chayv, you need that the nikaf be a bar chiyuv. Asi shapir shekev me'ach shisa nikaf enu shalom b'kol. Ishuv in klal isur lamakiv in tzorpol din dechir. Actually, eno shalom. Right, we're holding now that if you have an isur lav, that's not shavah b'kol, it's nidche. But we just said that this is an isur shavah b'kol according to Rav Ada bar Rava, because even an isha is musheres. But Rav Ada bar Rava holds that there's no isur on the makif if there's no isur on the nikaf. And there's no isur on the nikaf. Because what? Because it's a lav shein shavah b'kol. Because what? Because the isur lav of the nikaf is not applied to an isha. And she's only included in the lav as far as a makif. Is that what he means? In isur makif el b'mokom shanikaf bar chiyuva. I don't get it. What do you mean Eino Shavah Bakol? We're holding now, like the other sheet of Rav Ada bar Rava, that noshim is haros. Why is it Eino Shavah Bakol? It sounds like he's using circular reasoning. I mean, the whole premise of his question was that this is an Isur HaShav Bakol. And he says, no, it's an Isur Shein HaShav Bakol. So I think what he's saying is that there are two separate lav in here. There's one lav on the makif and one on the nikaf. Once there's no lav on the nikaf, the mela, there's no Isur on the makif. Sounds very much like the Imrei Moshe, that again, when you have a makif and a nikaf, the makif is going to violate the Issa because he's doing a Maisa Vera of Hekef vis-a-vis the nikaf. But if the nikaf doesn't have that Maisa Vera, then the makif doesn't have the Issa. And here the nikaf doesn't have that Issa because as far as the Issa of the nikaf is concerned, it's called the Lav Shein Shava Bakol. And therefore it overrides the Lav Shein Shava Bakol of Hekef. Once you override that lav, then there's no isa on the makiv as well, not because of esi docha losas, but because the losas that enjoins the makiv from doing a maisa hekef is conditional on the fact that there's a maisa vera for the nikaf. But there's no maisa vera for the nikaf in this case. If we classify the lav of the nikaf as a lav sheina shavim bakol, v'adayim koshel l'loshen arisha b'divrei Rashi b'makis. What daf is this? Chof Amid Beis. The Isra Makif, the Isra Nikaf, Lav Echadhu. Rabbi Chanan doesn't jive with Rashi because Rashi says in one Lishna that the Isra Nikaf, Isra Makif is one indivisible lav. In Kain Isra Kofu Lav Hashava Bakol. Shekain Af Noshim Bechlal Azor Shol Lahakva Noshim. Ein Hiksha Al Rav Huna Som Shenoshim Einem Musharos Al Akofas Acherim Masha Shaniu B'Kedushin Noshim Musharos Al Kol Lotas Eshvat Torah Puts me Lota Kifu V'Tumas Kohen Because Harei Ein Shnei HaIsurim Shavim L'Inyan Noshim Ein Noshim Einem Musharos Af Lola Hakiv Acherim V'Inyan Tuma Ein Musharos Lola Tami Kohen and Kivisa Barambam Shisrael Am Tami Kohen and Loki. Again, the first kasha that he asks, I understand. In other words, the approach and the explanation of Rabbi Chanan is contingent on accepting one of two Lashonos in Rashi, that there are two separate lavin, one for the makif, one for the nikah. But now he's asking another question. According to Rav Huna, who holds that Noshim ain't a musaros, and yet the Gemara in Kedushin establishes that Noshim Shavim La Noshim, that women are like men, as far as Kol Losa Seshvat Torah, with the exception of Lo Takifu. Okay, so far so good. So that seems to reflect the Shita of Huna that Noshim Eina Musar Sal Kaf. So what's the kasha now? Re'ein Shnei Ha'isurim Shavim Linyan Noshim. Noshim Musaros Afshalola Hakif Achirim Linyan Tumei Musaros Lo Amekor. So that according to Rav Huna, when we exempt women from hakafa, it means they're allowed to be makif acherim. That's not true in the case of tumah. Why is that such a problem? Because if you're saying that lo sakifu is an exception because the lav itself, as far as noshim, is paka, that's not really true as far as tumas kohanim is concerned. So you're not being consistent. Okay. Now let's just see if we can fit in one more paragraph here before we end the shir for today, and then in Mitzvah Shem tomorrow we'll get into the sugya on Daf Vav. The Fisha Nemar upaas b'sekanim lo yigalechu, 'Shomei ani af kohen mitzora kain. 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 'Shomei ani af kohen mi I might think, let's go back to the Gemara. It's always good to see it in sun, and then we'll wrap this up for today. See, where is it? Oh, here it is. It is approximately 8 lines down from the top, roughly. Right? So maybe the lav should apply even in the case of mitzora, who has a mitzvah of giluah. So that if he's a kohen and he's also mitzora, then he's not allowed to be megalech zakano, tamalomer zakano. Now, what do we derive from the word zakana? That even a kohen mitzora is megalech kol sa'aro, the af es zakana. And from here we should derive a conclusion in kol kula that esei dochalosas. And even though the isa tiglachas and isa chain and shav bakol, like the Yitzhak HaKofas HaRosh, that's how Rashi says that women are not included in the Yisur. Eno inyi lalav shein hashavah kol tnei inyi lav hashavah. Hikshu Arishonim, we're on the bottom of Lamed Gimel. The das hatartzin shalos savra lachalik. Shiny kohanim sheribo ben mitzvos. Umishum lo tasaviyesim adu noken atanet kohen. Why does the Brisa say Shomeani af kohen mitzorakin? Forget about a kohen mitzorah. It should apply to any mitzorah. It doesn't have to be a kohen. To our Ashbov Ritva, Sha'af hu savar sheish chilush bekohen. Sheish behem ribui mitzvos. L'chein noken atana kohen. Mikom ein zel chilush muat, v'dayin eno matzrich posuk miyutar l'drasha, ki efshar ladas misvara, ulefichal zkono miyutar, l'lamed al esei shedocha af lav hashava bakol. In other words, even though there's an extra chidush in the case of a Kohen, because Ribsa B'Torah Torah mitzvahs harbe, but nevertheless, there still is compelling logic which makes it unnecessary to have a pasuk and a drasha, a redundant pasuk. And what is that svara? That svara is what? That Esei Dochalosa says should apply, and that's the extra pasuk that's teaching me that Esei Dochalosa, even in a Losa Shein and Shavbat. So as far as this particular scenario is concerned, we certainly would apply Esei Dochalosas. Because this is a Lav Shein of Shavbat Kol. And whether or not he's a Kohen is irrelevant. So why did the Torah have to add Zkono to teach me that Esei Dochalosa, even if it's Eino Shavbat Kol? A bit of a weak answer that the Rishonim are offering here, because at the end of the day, they're admitting that there is this svara of a Torah Ribsa, mitzvahs harb. Yeah, he wants to tell you that even a Kohen who has ribui mitzvahs, he's allowed to be megaleach in the case that he is in nos. Okay, then. So this is where we're going to end for today, and we'll take a look on Daf Lamed Daled tomorrow. You have that, Jeff, and then we want to move a little bit further in the Sugyas HaGemara to get up to Kibbut Avim, which we began on Yom Chamishi. Okay then? All right, thank you so much. Have a great day.